Just for the audience background, each panel speaker has been given a couple of minutes to chart why languages matter to them from their different sectors and perspectives. So I might start, Barbara, with you in your role as head of the European Commission representation. Barbara, contrary to I don't think you speak the full gambit of 20 plus languages, but we might get you to start off with your opening remarks, Barbara, and then I'll move to other colleagues. And then, with apologies in advance, if the Tánaiste does appear, we might just put a pause on it and regroup afterwards. Barbara, over to you. Thank you.
So good afternoon, everybody. I'm very happy to be part of this panel because I think language learning is such an important part now, particularly of what Ireland should be about in terms of its membership of the European Union, probably the most important political and economic relationship that the country has. And I think, we all know that if you can speak to people in their own language, you have a much better chance of negotiating well, getting on well, and also getting a better understanding of what you're dealing with. And I think, to be successful also in the single market, it's very important to be able to speak languages. I mean, we tend, I think, to rest a bit on our laurels because English has become the lingua franca, particularly where I work. It wasn't always like that. When I joined first the European Commission, French was by far the most spoken language at the time, but that was when we were in a Europe of 12 and then 15, so things have changed a lot since then. But if I could just say, I mean, I think, we all know that Irish people have done very, very well in the EU institutions, but that really is beginning to come to a demographic cliff end, and we need to get more people into the EU institutions. And I'm afraid that requires languages. I mean, you need to be really proficient in 2 languages. We say satisfactory, but remember, it's a competition. There isn't a pass mark. We take the top performers. So if you're not more than, if you're not really basically almost fluent in 2 languages, you're probably not going to be placed very highly in the competition. I mean, that's the first thing. The second thing is now to get your first promotion in the EU institutions, you have to have a 3rd language, at least to be able to function in a 3rd language. So it's become tighter, more stringent, and I mean, maybe with the expansion of the EU, there's a lot of different languages around. So we really need to upskill our people. We need to treat language learning seriously. I think it was neglected for many years here, but I think we're on the right tracks. There's a lot of different initiatives from the Department of Foreign Affairs, as well as now learning languages at school level, which I know Tanya knows a lot, Karen knows a lot more about than I do. So I think things have changed a lot, and I think I have to commend DFA and the people who are working with also school students early to get them early acquainted with the language. I mean, that is the big difference, I think, between what happens here and, say, our colleagues on the continent who are much more exposed to foreign languages. So I think there's many reasons why we need to invest in foreign languages, and not least to maintain Ireland's influence in the European institutions. It's very important that we have a cultural mix, not just of Irish people, but across the board of all the different nationalities, to have an understanding of how people think about things, what issues could be very sensitive in a particular member state. I mean, there's a whole myriad of reasons why languages are important. Noel mentioned the sad statistics, and I think, we are more or less bottom of the class. I mean, if the UK was still a member of the club, we'd be probably ahead of them. So we miss them because they push us down to the bottom. But anyway, just to say that, we totally support and work. I have a person in my office who just does language promotion and works very closely with many of you on promoting languages, particularly in schools. He goes around the various careers fairs to encourage Irish people to think about this. I mean, any Irish person coming out with the language, however they learned it, is a potential European civil servant. We have to look at it that way. They can improve, they can, go for bringing them up to another level. But once they have a basic, they should be thinking along those lines and thinking that, and not to be defeated by the idea that they're not proficient enough. They need to work on it. So I'll give you one concrete example. I have a young Irish official who worked with me. She's now moved on, but she actually practiced learning how to use a French keyboard, so that when she was doing her concours, she was able immediately to use the keyboard that she needed to do the French part of her test. I mean, that's the concentration and level of dedication people, put in to just making sure they have all the elements aligned so that they can pass. Sorry to focus a bit too much on my own particular area where we're trying to raise the numbers, but I think you've got the message. Thanks, Noel.
So Karen, I might come to you next if that's okay. So Karen Ruddock has directed the activities of Post-Primary Languages Ireland since 2009, and obviously heavily involved with the Languages Connect Summit that the Tánaiste spoke about in his address. So I might ask you for your opening remarks, Karen. Thank you. Over to you.
Yes, so for those who aren't familiar with our work at PPLI, we have been implementing a lot of the key actions in the Languages Connect strategy. Sorry, I should first of all say thank you very much for inviting me here today. It's lovely to see so many familiar faces. It's particularly exciting to be on a panel with the Tánaiste. Many of you don't realise that the Tánaiste was in fact the person who, when he was Minister for Education, first introduced languages in the primary schools and also set up the organisation which I now direct. He also made sure that foreign languages were on the programme for government, the introduction of foreign languages in primary. So it's great to, what he said. But yes, over the last 5 years, a lot of work has been done. Obviously, there's still a lot more work to be accomplished, but there's a lot of positivity, and the Tánaiste reference that event 2 weeks ago, Think Languages Festival. A particular highlight of it this year was the involvement of the HEIs, and we did have 1,000 post-primary students visiting the HEIs that week, all kinds of workshops and language taster sessions and tours of campuses to encourage students to take up languages at third level. It was just fabulous success. In addition to that, they went out to schools. The HEIs visited 100 schools that week. We had 15,000 students in total participating from 180 schools. So these kind of initiatives, are taking place. We also have other awareness raising. A vast number of resources have been created over the last 5 years for guidance counsellors, for example, how to sell languages, ready-made resources like they can use in the classroom to encourage greater take-up of languages. Now we have this whole school guidance framework. We've also been working with teachers of foreign languages to promote languages. We're at every event there is for guidance counsellors, for school management teams, for higher options. You'll see Languages Connect there. So a lot of work going on. Diversification is a big piece of the strategy, and currently we're providing for about 10,000 students in the new languages. So for example, like Polish, Lithuanian, Portuguese, Japanese and Chinese. So we have as well, in addition to those students, about 700 students attending classes on Saturdays and online. We have blended models of provision. Again, most of the projects that are most successful are very much done in collaboration with other organisations. So for example, we have blended learning for Polish up in Cavan and Monaghan, working with Cavan, Monaghan and ETB. So there's great work going on there to increase participation in learning the lesser taught languages. But a lot of work has been done in the teacher supply area. There are plenty of new teacher education programs. language upskilling programs for teachers. There's been a doubling in the number of foreign language assistants, and we're training them now. There's induction, there's mentoring, there's special communities of practice for the foreign language assistants. As we know, there's increased participation in Erasmus Plus programs. We've seen a new specification for modern languages at junior cycle. There are new specifications in some of the heritage languages like Lithuanian and Mandarin Chinese, Polish, Portuguese. Mandarin Chinese is taught also as a foreign language. New school exchanges have been incentivized. Obviously with COVID, a lot of new online exchanges as well. I suppose opportunities opened up in that virtual space. We've introduced CLIL, content and language integrated learning in schools, and trained teachers. There have been funding for the summer camps that the Tánaiste referred to. There are additional allocation provided by the Department of Education for schools that wish to diversify. So there's a whole lot going on in addition to order to prepare the way for the introduction of primary languages in the curriculum from 2025, which the NCCA are still working on. We are implementing a module, Say Yes to Languages in primary schools at the moment. So we're in 1,200 primary schools this year, implementing that with 15 languages represented. French is the most popular choice still, with Spanish and Irish Sign Language close behind. The feedback is very positive on that. It's an opportunity for pupils to develop oral language skills, create cross-curricular opportunities, and it's growing in popularity. We, as the Tánaiste also referenced the summit, we had 1,200 teachers showed up on a Saturday. It was purely voluntary. Many of them came from 32 counties, so many of them got up at 5 a.m. to ensure that they got there for the beginning. So I think that shows the dedication and the commitment that is out there among teachers. But we were particularly, I suppose, thrilled that so many HEIs came along. I think it is really important, the collaboration across second and third level. We need to grow a population that speaks languages. Obviously, we can create the demand of students to go to third level. We need the third level institutions to graduate graduates with language competence who can be good role models for our young people. A lot of what we hear these days from the young people is we don't have role models. We don't know why languages are important. Obviously, we're trying to counteract that, but that is what we get back from the research, from the focus groups. We don't know why languages are, we don't see any role models, so we need more role models. We obviously also need teachers in order, for the wheel to keep turning. But that's a kind of whistle-stop tour maybe of the kind of work going on in the context of implementing Languages Connect.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Karen. Really inspiring to hear all about the incredible initiatives that you and your colleagues are undertaking, and it's fantastic to hear that. And now I'm delighted to invite our next panelist to give us her perspectives. And Linsey Farrell has been Deputy Secretary and Head of Education Policy and Children's Services at the Department of Education in Northern Ireland since October 2021. And prior to moving this post, Linsey held a number of various positions and roles within the Executive Office. So Linsey, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to be here today. Firstly, I have to apologise for my voice. It sounds much worse than what it is. I'm just a bit hoarse, but hopefully you'll all be able to hear. I'm really delighted to be part of this wonderful event today. I think I find myself in a position where something that I personally I'm very passionate about is actually coming into a wonderful collidance with my professional work and my job, which is a lovely place to be. I could spend a lot of time today talking about all of the challenges that we have in Northern Ireland, particularly around languages. And many of them will not be dissimilar to other issues that have come up on the panel already today. So we know that we have an issue in terms of our societal value that is placed on languages. I think certainly we have a particular challenge in the north around a tone that has been set around the importance of the STEM agenda within the overall skills agenda framework. And that is sending out a message to our young people that in some way languages is less important. So I think this sense of you can't be what you can't see is certainly a very important one within Northern Ireland, and one that we will need to tackle. We know that we have some structural and fundamental issues also in terms of both the content and the delivery of our curriculum, and then obviously our teacher supply playing into that as well. But I don't want to depress the audience too much today with all of those challenges, because I know you'll all be very, very familiar with those. But when I reflect on my current position, and indeed in my previous post within the Executive Office, and think about what languages can and do bring, it takes me to what is the sort of Northern Ireland, what's the sort of society that we all want to live in? And I think as we emerge from the legacy of the pandemic, and much of its impact is a story yet to be told, actually, in terms of the impact on our children and young people, now more than ever, don't we need relationships, and we need communication, and we need empathy, and we need compassion, and we need people who are comfortable with nuance. And for me, when I think about all of those things that we need in both the young people that we want to equip for both today's and tomorrow's world, and when we think of the society we want to shape, that for me is what languages can and do bring. Is that more widely understood? Probably outside of rooms like this, probably less so. And so for me in Northern Ireland, that's my starting position in terms of engaging with my colleagues in the Department for the Economy. This is not just a pure hard-nosed economic transactional argument. This is about the skills that we want to create within our pipeline, and those skills have to be much more than those transactional negotiations we've already heard talked about today, but have to be about the ability to empathise, the ability to build relationships, the ability to work within a team, the ability to deal and be comfortable with difference. And that's something that Northern Ireland's still grappling with within its own community. And we have seen how language can actually be a very unifying force. Often it can be perceived as divisive, but we can see in our Northern Ireland education system that we have a very, a growing and maturing Irish medium education sector there that is very much steeped in immersive education. And that in itself brings its own benefits and its own strengths, and language there is being used as a unifying force, bringing people together that otherwise may not have come together. And so there is also much to be celebrated and much to be built upon. But for me, there's a number of things that we need to do within Northern Ireland. One is that positioning piece around languages, around their value within wider society. We need the skills conversation to become much broader. When I talk to industry, they talk to me about transversal skills, and that's what they want in the people who come out of school and who come out of university. And for me, that's what languages can offer. And so the challenge for all of us in this room is how we articulate that and make that more widely known and understood. But ultimately, in my position in the Department of Education in Northern Ireland, when we look at the purpose of our curriculum, it's to produce well-rounded young people who can contribute to society and to the economy. And for me, that has to be understood in its broadest sense. So of course we need the digital skills, of course we need the green skills, but of course we need all of the skills that learning languages can bring. And so for me, there's lots of challenges ahead, but I'm ever the optimist, and I think there are many opportunities. And I'll just say this in closing, like has already been said in terms of the Republic here, the North is also a changing society. And over the last number of years, we have seen a changing demographic. We have seen the numbers of newcomer children arriving within our schools in Northern Ireland really increasing, rising numbers of refugees and asylum seekers. And with that, of course, has posed lots of new questions for our education system. but it's brought huge opportunities as well. And so there are some wonderful examples across our schools of where language is being used as that connector. It's being used as that place of belonging and that point of belonging amongst our students. The challenge for us is how we take those pockets of excellent practice and make that more system-wide. So thank you.
Thank you, Linsey, and fantastic to hear about the great work that you're doing in Northern Ireland and to share it with us here. So delighted to have you with us today. And last but by no means least, before we go to our panel Q&A, delighted to have with us Claire McGee, who is the Head of Education and Innovation Policy for IBEC. So Claire, over to you.
Thank you, Noel, and thank you very much for the invitation to be with you today. So my role in IBEC really is around bringing the business voice to government, to the education and training system, and indeed to the wider enterprise community around what the future of work will look like and what are the skills that we're going to need, not just to survive in that future, but actually thrive in that. And that brings me back to when, similar to your own experience, Linsey, really around, well, what are employers looking for into the future? And when I speak to them, I hear a lot around the ability for critical thinking, the ability to research and to analyse, the ability to communicate that research and synthesise that research, and the ability to collaborate. And that gets me thinking, I'm going, there is a programme of work that actually can help you do all of that. And it's really around the languages, and it brings me back to that. So it's really key around that transversal skills, and that how language learning, regardless of what that language is ultimately how do you unpick the skills that you're learning through that programme of study, and then how do you have the language yourself to be able to communicate the skills that you have learned through that programme of study as you're maybe making the next phase in your journey through into employment. So that's what I would totally agree with you, Linsey, is around that wider discussion and wider conversation around the ability to develop skills through this programme of language learning. The other thing I'd like to say is 250 years is a huge achievement. So firstly, congratulations on that. We talk a lot about sustainability at the moment, and that just proves to me that language learning is very sustainable and will continue to be sustainable. But how do we make it even more sustainable for the next 250 years as Ireland continues to position itself internationally? Barbara spoke a little bit around the role of the languages within the institutions of the European Commission. That's also a real concern for Irish business at the moment, that we are losing that degree of influence, let's say, across the different institutions. Irish organisations and industry wants to ensure that we have the right and the best people performing on behalf of Ireland's economy and society in international discussions. And if we're not going to be at the table, then how can we influence the opportunity for us into the future? So then we all know this. That's the other key point about this. This is, I think we're all probably singing from the same choir sheet here. So how do we then convey these important messages to those people who are not perhaps as aware of the opportunities that language learning can present? We're heading into Christmas time. There's going to be a lot of interesting conversations around the dinner table in advance of the CEO process kicking off, towards the end of January, early February. So how do we communicate to the number one influencer towards students who are making that determination, which is their parents, and in particular their mother, over the next, and that's research bears that out, actually. Research bears that out. So at the moment, how do we then transfer this information that we're all very familiar with around the type of skills that you can gain from language learning and the opportunities of where languages can bring you? I think that's really what's going to be really empowering for young people as they embark on their language learning. So couple of key kind of takeaway messages from me. I believe confidence is a key element for learning languages. How do we build confidence in our young people? So I'm thinking now the preschoolers and the primary school children, so that when the time comes for them to make strategic decisions about the subject choices that they need to take at a different time, to be able to build the types of transversal skills and career and pivoting careers that they want, we need to help build their confidence in language communication. Secondly, languages build confidence in our society, has been very clearly articulated by all the panel members, but it also builds confidence within our enterprise sector. So if I was to leave you with one word today, or one message today, it's really around how can languages build confidence for our future, and how can we build confidence in our influential people to help them support people to pursue study in languages. So it's a two-way streak here about confidence. And I'm going to leave that with you, or maybe that's something we can discuss a little bit later, is how do we use this opportunity to convey those critical messages that language learning can open a global world for you, in small businesses, in large businesses, but you need to have the confidence to be able to take that next step. And then how do we give the people who are supporting them on that journey the confidence to take that leap of faith in languages? Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. I'm not going to lie. I did draw a collective sigh of relief when you were talking about influencers. I thought, oh no, she's going to come up with an Instagrammer or a TikToker that I won't have heard of. But you went to safe ground when you talked about the mammies. That's okay. That's great. So thank you very much, not least for fantastic timekeeping by my distinguished panel. So very grateful on that. And Tánaiste, I might just begin, if I can, by asking you, based on what you've heard so far, your own relationship with language learning, given your diplomatic role as previously as Taoiseach and of course as Minister for Foreign Affairs, you are well versed in the language of diplomacy, and Tánaiste go léir go bhfuil an Gaeilge go líofa agat. But how can we, to Claire's point, how can we get the confidence and harness? I'm looking, we'll say, take Irish. I mean, people break out in a sweat when we talk about the Mochanílach or Digital Ginnadach. And, in your role as Tánaiste and as Minister for Foreign Affairs, what do you think you can inspire this distinguished audience with what are learnings and takeaways?
Well, first of all, I wish I had greater competency in many languages than I do. I was quite useful as an impersonator early on in my life. And the French teacher was convinced when he asked me to pronounce the word garçon. He was convinced I'd been in France on holidays for quite a while. I was only in first class in Greece. I was never on holidays anywhere. But I did a good take on how to pronounce it. So I did French and would have loved the works of Maupassant and so on. But the big thing I would say, and I'm out of school a long time now, spoken language. We just got into, we sort of say you must master at an early age the literature and so on. You do eventually, but I think if we give confidence to the spoken word, and that's the big transformation into teaching of the Irish language in the last 30 years has been the emphasis from the written word to the spoken word. The language lives or dies on the spoken language. I think thankfully in the modern era, because of migration, and this is a very strong positive, if you walk any town in Ireland or cities now, you're hearing many languages. When I grew up, that was not the case. We should look at that as a positive in terms of language learning and sort of openness to language. So I would, in terms of the second level and primary, we just must constantly look for ways that children and young people can speak a language, no matter what they're learning, as much as they possibly can. One concern I'd have is that I think we've expanded, for example, the learning of Chinese quite significantly, even at second level onto third level. Some very good programs now where if it's international arts in Chinese or whatever, there was fantastic programs going on in China and Shanghai and elsewhere pre-COVID. Some of that has gone down, but I'm wondering, are we then, when people come back, actually have a proficiency in the spoken language? Are we creating opportunities for them? So I think we should, at a state level and agencies, to do a bit of this, we should significantly expand the internships that Enterprise Ireland offers, that IDA offers, that Department of Foreign Affairs Board, BIA, Tourism Ireland. We should just significantly increase the numbers, because what you're doing there is you're opening up the opportunities for young people to work in countries in a chosen career, absorb the culture, absorb the language, and they do pick it up much faster in that environment. I think we're very conservative in these programs because everybody has a budget and everybody's told you can do 3 this year, you can do, in terms of an agency now. But I would, and invariably those who apply for those positions, from my experience, are committed people, talented people, and want to not just go out there for the sake of ticking a box, but really want to embrace the experience. And in terms of foreign policy, I think we're fortunate. I'm biased. I think we've some wonderful young people coming into the Department of Foreign Affairs. I think they're diverse, great language competency and variety. I tell the story since I came back from Mozambique in July, where Irish diplomats, young diplomats, were involved in the Mozambique peace process and were members of the secretariat of that peace process. The second in command said to me, if I could clone a young Irish diplomat, I would clone them in terms of their contribution. So that's a positive, and that was said to me. But most of the younger people I meet in our network now have a command of languages other than Irish and English, and they're in a position to converse with the local population. And whether that's in Ramallah, or whether it's in Spain or in China, it's fantastic to see. And it just goes a long way in terms of breaking down barriers and developing relationships, which is the key to diplomacy, and so on. My final point is, I think it's the early years that really matter the most. And we're catching up all of the time. We're catching up fast now in terms of early age education and development of the child. But 0 to 3 are the key 3 years where we must try and broaden the opportunities for children just to hear language, different languages at once. I think that is absolutely essential because we learn more between 0 and 3 than we will for the rest of our lives.
Fantastic, thanks, Tánaiste. And who knows, they might all be speaking Corkese by the time they get to junior infants. Thank you for that.
It's a unique dialect, you know.
And speaking of unique dialects, Barbara, I might turn to you if I can, and obviously appreciate your remarks. You very kindly started your remarks before the Tánaiste arrived. But as head of the European Commission's representation in Ireland, obviously 24 official languages. And then, of course, there is the Euro-English or the Globish that has become a bit of a norm and a standard as well. Can you maybe just tell us a little bit or paint a picture about what it's like to work in such a multilingual environment, and what do you think Irish people bring to that? Is it an advantage being Irish, or do people automatically revert back to English once they hear the Irish accent?
Well, I think, as I said, English has become a bit of a lingua franca in the EU institutions. There's no question about that. I mean, yes, people lapse into other languages from time to time, but most meetings would be, in fact, nearly all meetings would take place in English on a working level. Irish people tend to be given a lot of jobs related to proofreading and correcting documents, and their English language skills are in much demand because there are a diminishing number of native English speakers now with the UK. Obviously, there's no recruitment now from the UK. And I mean, unless somebody has another nationality, obviously another EU nationality. So you are in very heavy demand, and Irish trainees tend to be snapped up very, very quickly, primarily because of the language skills, English language skills. But as I pointed out earlier before the Tánaiste arrived, the competition to get in has quite stringent language challenges now. And as I said, you really need to be very proficient in two to get through it now. It was easier when I did it. We did have to have an oral part in another language, but it wasn't as challenging. But they have kind of upped the ante, I would say, in terms of language skills. And then obviously, as I said, your first promotion, you need to have a third language. Many Irish people are refreshing their knowledge of the Irish language for that third language, so that they can be promoted as Irish is now, obviously, very much part and parcel of the language regime in Brussels. Yeah.
And Barbara, that's
a very interesting point. At the EU Council, but I should say this, at the EU Council meetings at 3:00 in the morning when things were getting testy and they're fighting over a clause or a word, look at us now. You see the sort of the Irish. Could you please say, is that word adequate? And you'd be convincing someone from Malta or someone from Malta that word is fine. I'm telling you, it means what you mean. You can accept it. It's not going to sell you down the river.
So we're learning all about these Brexit dividends, Tánaiste, aren't we? Actually, Tánaiste, just as a matter of interest, what language is spoken by all the leaders around the council table? What?
I think French is quite common. German, English.
In that order, or
mixed up? Yeah. I mean, English is still, because it's a language that people can approximate to, a common language. But French would be quite strong, and German.
And you spoke, Tánaiste, about obviously the excellent caliber of people working in the Department of Foreign Affairs. I can attest to this because the Department of Foreign Affairs steal many of my colleagues in European Movement Ireland. But credit where it's due on the government's EU job strategy, initiatives like the Karen mentioned, some of the excellent programs there, but also the Blue Star program, where we've about 120,000 primary school children. And I know, Tánaiste, you're a big champion and advocate of that. When the OECD report came out that said Irish teenagers had the highest in terms of literacy terms, but we ranked in the lowest 5 in terms of languages, what ambitions for your government do you see you'd like to introduce to reverse that trend, Tánaiste, if I may?
It's a trend I've been feeling that was happening for a while. I was interested in what Linsey, I think, said in terms of, is there a contest between STEM and languages? I'm just posing it. Don't kill me. Sorry.
And you are in the RIA.
Yeah, but I'm just conscious of it, like that we have, and we had to dramatically drive the STEM agenda, and it's worked. It's been very effective. But I remember starting second level German, French, kind of was the 2 big languages, and there was enthusiasm to do it. You don't get the same sense that it's as imperative today as we might have thought it was in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. That's all I'm saying. And I was heartened by what you were saying earlier, Karen, in terms of the number of take-ups. So I think it is a problem, and I think we should see it as a national objective to do far better than we are doing. I think we have greater variety of languages now being taught. I think some of the embassies have been very good. Japanese embassy are very proactive in terms of the learning of Japanese. I think we've made progress on the learning of Chinese as well in our system. But we could be doing more. And given that we've probably a better reservoir of talent within the country now in terms of languages than we would have had 20 years ago, we should be perhaps utilizing that a bit more. We all talk about when, because of multicultural society, we have a lot of teachers at second level teaching English or helping people who are coming in to learn English. It should be reversed somewhat and use the resource that is undoubtedly out there to start introducing other languages.
Absolutely. And Karen, I might get you to come in and respond to the Tánaiste's comments there. From your perspective and the vantage point you hold, how can we overcome the perceived difficulty of learning languages? And as an Anglophone island nation, how can we encourage our students to learn more foreign languages?
Yeah.
Loaded
I guess
question.
It's a question that we've all been asking ourselves. It is a pity, the competition or the perceived competition between STEM and foreign languages, and certainly the message that we really try to promote is that STEM is wonderful, but if you want to access STEM markets, you better have a language, because the reality is that our graduates are now competing with, even in a country that was a traditional recipient of Irish immigrants like Australia, you've far more immigrants to Australia from China than you have from Ireland, who all speak English as a matter of course. I think the competition has really changed. And, I always like these fun facts, but if you go back to the 90s, anyone who graduated in the 90s was competing probably, if you graduated from an Irish university, you were competing maybe with 10 Chinese graduates who spoke English. Now you would be competing with 100. So, we're becoming less and less competitive as nations in, other countries all speak English as a matter of course. I mean, everybody speaks English, but the competitive advantage is having the language of the people that you need to work with. And maybe we need to change the value proposition. This is a term being bandied about at the moment that I just came across recently. We've talked about languages as a skill that's important, but maybe we need to look more to the kind of discussion that's come from the panel today about transversal skills, about the empathy, about the adaptability, about the, even sustainability. Our young people are very interested in sustainability. It's much talked about. There is research coming out now which says that having those who have more than one language are actually more likely to actively participate in global issues. So maybe we need to look, at that growing awareness that languages play a role in sustainable development. That it's about building inclusive knowledge societies and preserving the cultural and linguistic heritage of the heritage language speakers that we have in our communities. Maybe we just need to shift the way we're selling languages and talk about them in that kind of context.
I think part of the problem might be the point system again. That we do so much, and it's fascinating. And I know I've had 3 who've gone through the college, but arts and humanities somehow don't have the same currency as they once would have had, and they're compared to financial services courses or to all of these, and you've probably had a greater vocationalization of second level and third level, which I think is a big problem. I keep saying to young people when I visit schools, and I do a lot of that, I just say to young people, do what you love. Don't allow anyone tell you won't get a job in that. If you love history, just keep loving it and keep doing it, and you'll end up somewhere. And we have to get that message out there, because the number of people who are saying, well, will I do arts? I'm at 550 points. That is a real thing out there, amongst young people. And we've got to rediscover for society the centrality of the humanities in education and with that language. And I think that's the big challenge ahead of us, because you do need the humanities to sort out society, not the word sort out, but to have a rich society, and a society that's really culturally strong and cohesive and so forth. And that's what I think is missing. Yes, and you see it in like the semesterization programs at third level. It's all, like I keep saying, where's the campus experience anymore? Where we're 3 months there, we're 6 months over there. Where's the campus experience that gives you that cross-fertilization of ideas and experiences? Like it's back to Newman and let's reimagine the university experience. But nowadays it's very much focused on the job and the end job, and maybe overly so. And I think that's to the detriment of language learning, I think.
And can I just, could I just say one thing? Yeah, we were just discussing at lunchtime how the reality as well, according to the research, is that more than 50% of Irish graduates are not actually working in the particular discipline that they studied in college, because it isn't about that, as you say, Tánaiste. It's about the knowledge, it's about the skills, it's about the experience. And really, we put too much focus on the course. Yeah, and I really agree with you there.
Thanks. I don't know what that says about me having done European studies, French and Spanish in UCC, but there you go. Barbara, you wanted to come in, and then I'm going to go to Claire and then Linsey. Sorry, Barbara.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on that, because I don't want to leave the impression that it's about languages getting into work in the EU institutions. We're looking for economists, lawyers, administrators who have languages. I mean, that's the kind of basic given, if you like. We're not actually looking for the person who studied languages as such, although obviously that person is welcome to apply. But really, what we're looking for, sort of the full package in a way. Somebody who has been trained in some discipline and also has a very good level of linguistic ability. I mean, it's important to say that, because, and that is what we're getting, say, from young Germans, young French, that they come with 3 languages. Yeah. They come ready-made with, German, English, French. And, that's what's out there as the competition.
Yeah. And I always use, Barbara, the example, and she won't mind me saying it because I have sought her permission in advance, but Patricia Riley, Commissioner Mairead McGuinness, chef de cabinet, is a vet. And now she's the Commissioner Chef de Cabinet. So, Claire, I might turn to you. Did you want to come in on some of the business and the STEM side of things?
Yeah, well, two points around that. One, I would say, the STEM sectors haven't at all cracked either. So maybe be careful what you're looking for in that regard too. But I think what's really important here is it's around that opportunity that languages in conjunction with other programs can deliver to you. So how are we communicating what these types of roles and opportunities are? And that's probably what the STEM industries have done very well, is identified careers and pathways into those careers. So perhaps maybe a little bit of thinking around that breadth of opportunity, because you speak about these wonderful people and I'm kind of, wow, how do they get those jobs? And that's what those conversations, unfortunately, you're right, Tánaiste, is maybe the focus is a little bit on the jobs. What I find is when you speak to 16, 17, 18-year-olds, that's what they're speaking about. And then when they get to 22, actually the focus on the job softens a little bit because they've had a good campus experience and they know that the skills that they've learned through their program of study, be it further education and higher education, will help them transition into the world of work. So really, how do you talk about some of your wonderful students and your alumni and around what roles are they in now and keeping that network alive? Second thing that I would also say is I also sit on the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment, and there is a major piece of work underway at the moment around the redevelopment of a new senior cycle. So effectively what the Leaving Cert of the future is going to look like. And I would implore all of you to contribute to that debate, because this is the first major reform of that in about 50 years. There's been kind of tweaks around on different subjects, but actually this is what a new Leaving Cert is going to look like. A lot more kind of continuous assessment, which could be quite interesting for language learning in particular. So if you feel you have an opportunity to contribute to that, use your voice and use your experience, because this is how we do encourage a more, I suppose, holistic education experience. And that's underway at the moment. And I would advise you maybe to look into that and through your own structures and even the committee here through the Royal Irish Academy, it would be worth maybe making a concerted contribution to that discussion, because you are in such a knowledgeable place to inform the people who are developing that. And I wouldn't want you to lose that opportunity.
So there you go, some homework for you all, ladies and gentlemen. And Linsey, I might leave the final remark to you. No pressure. But what are your thoughts and observations on what you've heard today?
I think the big takeaway for me is the need to really focus on the narrative around languages and the skills. You know, if I think about some of the work we've been doing in Northern Ireland around careers and the research, it does tell us that the most significant influencer is the mother in the home. But it also tells us that actually what we understood by careers is no longer the reality, in that, in fact, there is no actual career pathway now, but we need to prepare our young people to potentially change jobs 10 to 12 times over the course of their lifetime. So for me, the trick here is how we articulate a narrative that is what languages brings to that, how languages will equip young people with that agility, that adaptability, change management, and ability to think creatively and to problem solve. And for me, it's finding those champions and those ambassadors that young people actually can look at and say, yes, that could be me. From a Northern Ireland perspective as well, I think there's something fundamental about starting earlier. We know that for everything, we need to get in those first 1,001 days. Right. And so for me, that's key as well. So thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Linsey. Thank you. Well, there is a well-known Czech proverb which says that you live a new life for every new language you speak. If you know only one language, you live only once. So I think we have had a fantastic panel to kickstart the 250th anniversary of the first chair in modern languages. So ladies and gentlemen, a big boulabus and appreciation. Yeah.